Hi, I'm Reale, and this is my podcast. Welcome to all my friends, visitors, and even enemies. Yeah, I have a message for you during this podcast and its episodes too. I beat you. I'm back. The more I keep trying to get away, the more they keep pulling me back. When's the last time you heard that? Anyway, uh, my vision for this podcast was to correct uh, my legacy as the former president of the New York City Transit Police Benevolent Association, which was the fifth largest police department in the country, and the merge that I negotiated and signed a memorandum of understanding with then Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and the true history of what followed that. The entire version of what you would believe if you were just to rely on Google back in 1997 is that Reale was a bad guy. He was indicted. The indictment said all horrible things about him. It charged him with more than 40 federal counts, including racketeering, conspiracy to commit racketeering. And it's just not a nice story on the legacy of Ron Reale. And I'm going to correct that. I'm going to put the truth out there. And everything I say can be verified. Everything I say can be verified. You can pull the court records and give you the docket numbers, and you'll see that everything I say is true. It was a bumpy road getting beyond the indictment. I faced a more than 40 count federal indictment in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, where the Honorable Judge Deborah Batts presided, and she was an honorable judge. I faced that without ever having put on a case during the entire 4-month trial. I didn't put on a single witness. First of all, they were all intimidated that they would have been marked by the government for prosecution if they testified against the government on my behalf. So I decided to go at it with my attorney, Bruce Maffio, who was an excellent attorney and still is an excellent attorney. Shout out to Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. He beat more than 40. He beat 40 counts. And the idea is that I went on trial for these 40 counts in a 4-month trial, only cross-examining the government's witnesses. I successfully beat 40 counts, and I was convicted, though, of the conspiracy to commit racketeering, tax evasion, and campaign finance fraud. And we're going to discuss all that in future episodes. I appealed it. The appeal was affirmed on the conviction in a two judges voting to affirm the conviction and one dissenting judge, who was the chief judge, Judge Oaks, who wrote a dissenting opinion saying it's unfathomable to me how my distinguished colleagues could have convicted Mr. Reale, could affirm the conviction of Mr. Reale for conspiracy to commit racketeering. We're going to get into all of that. It was an unjust prosecution. It was an unjust conviction. And the appeal was just as unjust. But that's sometimes the cards that you get dealt in life, and you move on. So I was a paralegal since 1982, and I was sentenced to 21 years following the conviction. I did a motion back to the Honorable Judge Batts, and I requested concurrent sentencing as opposed to consecutive, and she granted it. So I got 3 days credit for every day I was in prison. So my sentence was reduced to 7 years. But as a matter of law, it was a 21-year sentence. I have so much more to tell beyond that, and I'm going to talk about my time in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, how the Federal Bureau of Prisons put me in solitary confinement for a few months to try to break me, threatened to send me down south where they hated labor unions. And I had to sue them to get out of solitary confinement, and I did that too. We're going to talk about that in another episode. The idea is that my journey's been a very rough and tumble one. It's never been easy. It's always been the nail that stood up and the enemies who tried to hammer it down. They didn't succeed. I'm here today talking to you on this podcast and bringing it to you. I was born in Brooklyn. At 3 years old, I was placed into the Angel Guardian home. I was born under the name of Ronald Gervasi, who was my mother's first husband, who signed the birth certificate, and I carried that name. I carried that name from until age 12, when I was returned home from the Angel Guardian home, and my mother registered me in William McKinley Junior High School in Fort Hamilton Parkway in Brooklyn, under that name with no paperwork to back it up. They just put the name down, and I carried that name through junior high school and high school. I didn't change the name and legally identify as Ron Reale until I joined the New York City Transit Police in 1974. I brought an action to legally change my name to Ronald Reale. Reale was my mom's second husband. He wasn't my father. Neither Gervasi nor Reale was my father. I would come to learn, and it would be verified by the United States government during the trial, where they said that they brought in evidence boxes marked Reale, Ron Reale / Genovese crime family. Naturally, we challenged that, being in the presence of the jury, and asked that they be removed. And they argued legacy, that my father was a member of the Genovese faction of organized crime. And therefore, by legacy, so was I. That was a lot of bullshit. In any event, they were ordered to remove those boxes from the presence of the jury during the trial. And the trial resumed. I didn't meet my father till I was 21 years old. I had challenged my mother, telling her I knew Gervasi wasn't my father, nor Reale, and I wanted to know who he was. Finally, she gave up and said, okay, you want to know who your father is? Fine. It so happened that he was arrested in the Appalachian Mountain Mafia meeting, the biggest mafia meeting ever in New York, and he supposedly wound up on page 1 of the Daily News in handcuffs, and she wanted to protect me from that whole thing. So she gave me the name Reale. I met my father when I was 21 years old. I was already a police officer and I met him in the 19th hole, a known mafia hangout on 86th Street and 14th Avenue in Brooklyn. And we introduced, and he said that he was a member of the La Cosa Nostra. And then he said to me, I guess you don't like that, do you? And I said, no, I wish you were chief of police. In any event, I would get to know my father until he passed at age 58 with a heart attack. We're going to talk about that in one of the episodes also. We're going to learn how during the entire journey, it was one fight after another fight. And this is just a sequel to those fights. We're now, after more than 20 years, I'm breaking my silence. I'm correcting my legacy through the forum of YouTube, which is a great forum in modern times. Gives us all a chance to speak out. The idea is that the record is wrong. The history of the city of New York is wrong on the record that they portray. Google only portrays me, Ronald Reale, as indicted in 1997. That's not a accurate depiction of Ron Reale. And I need to correct that record. Also, I have a family. I have children and grandchildren. And they have a right to know the truth and have somewhere to go to hear my version of it. And that's what this podcast is about. The idea that I had a rough and tumble life is just part of who I am. I starting from high school when I was elected president of the SGO, and also president of all New York City public high schools. And I closed all schools down on one day, probably back in an article in Times or somewhere. You can search it. In protest of the Vietnam War. I called it Moratorium Day, and I shut down all 100 New York City high schools. Well, the teachers weren't happy about that, but I did it. I'm a great believer in my constitutional rights. The right to protest, the right to free speech, which I see being challenged today, and that can't happen. We can't allow that to happen. We have to speak out, and I'm going to add my voice to speaking out. The entire criminal prosecution was staged by Rudy Giuliani, who was then the mayor of the city of New York. And he retaliated against me for muscling him with some protests in front of his office after he became mayor to make him keep his word and consolidate the New York City Transit Police with the NYPD. I brought down bands playing We Will Rock You, Boom Boom. And we are the champions, my friend. And literally hundreds and hundreds of cops, if not thousands, shouting outside of his office and me speaking to them on a bullhorn, demanding the merge. Ultimately, Rudy heard us and gave in, and we did negotiate that merge in 1995, consolidating the transit police with the New York City Police Department. I retired that day. I walked over to One Police Plaza from City Hall, and I retired. I went into the private sector. There's a lot to tell in between, and I'll tell it during the versions, during the various episodes. Anyway, if you don't want to miss any of the various upcoming episodes, hit the button, subscribe, and the like button if you like what you see, so that you can be notified of future episodes. I have a true-to-life story to tell, and it starts with the city of New York. And it's part of correcting the record of the city of New York. As president, I was the first police union to introduce upgrading the firearms from the .38 caliber antiquated revolver to the semi-automatic 9mm. And that was a story in itself too, and I'll tell you about that. I passed a lateral move bill during that time. I was appointed by then Governor Mario Cuomo as a liaison for all public sector unions to him. There was more of a title than an actual job, but it gave me access to the governor and an ability to pass legislation through the Assembly and the Senate, and for him to ultimately sign it into law. He signed the lateral move bill into law above the objections of Mayor Dinkins and then Police Commissioner Kelly, another hypocrite. And transit police were allowed to orderly transfer from the subway beat, which was stinky and full of crime, into the more glamorous NYPD. They wanted to have access to units like Mounted, Harbor, Aviation. We had no need for horses, airplanes, or boats in the subway. We policed the old-fashioned way in the most dangerous, crime-ridden beat in the city of New York, bar none. The New York City subway system, which still holds that notoriety even today. So that lateral move bill allowed for, when new recruits were hired by the NYPD, they would assign a number of them to the subway beat and allow a number of transit cops to transfer into the larger New York City Police Department, which is bar none the best police department in the world. And they were unfairly assigned to the subway. So I accomplished that. And I ultimately accomplished what was on my agenda when I got elected in 1989 and served till 1995, of entering into a full consolidation of the NYPD and the transit police. through a memorandum of understanding executed then with the mayor, Rudy Giuliani. Rudy had it in for me. He didn't like the demonstrations that I had put in front of his office supporting the merge after his election, where I endorsed him, and then he slacked off on it. And I brought down bands and hundreds of police officers. The bands were playing music like, we will rock you, boom, boom. And plenty of amplification. He could hear it. And we are the champions, my friend. We got his attention. And ultimately, he entered into the memorandum of understanding with me. We both signed and I retired. And he went on with whatever Rudy does after he goes on. The idea is now, give a little shout out to him. Rudy, you're starting to face your karma. Now you too are suspended as a practicing attorney in New York, I understand. What goes around comes around. Suspended. And you are the one person behind staging a sham indictment against me with your friend, the former U.S. attorney from the Southern District of New York, who replaced you in that office as U.S. attorney, Mary Jo White, who brought more than a 40-count federal bullshit indictment against me. And I beat more than 40 counts at trial. I was acquitted, Rudy, not to your satisfaction. Oh, true, I was sentenced to 21 years and served 7 after the sentence was reduced by motion to run the sentencing concurrently. But I bore the scars. I'm here, Rudy. And I'm here to challenge you again. I challenge you to come on this podcast with me and let's talk about it. The lead FBI agent told me that it was all you're doing. He told me how every day after the trial, he had to contact your office and update you on the trial. You wanted nothing but retaliation, which you're known for. That's part of who Rudy has always been. Even though you didn't have the most pure background either. Your father was a crook. You married your cousin. Come on, Rudy. Give it a break. Other people are human too. We're going to talk more about that, but I invite you, Rudy, to inbox me. RonReale4348 at gmail.com, and we'll set up a podcast and talk about it together. Then I'm going to address the issue of a recent indictment in New York City of a hero Marine, Penny. His name is Penny. He was a passenger on a New York City subway when some lunatic stood up and threatened to kill him and his fellow passengers. He said, I can't tolerate that. I can't allow this to happen. He stood up and took him down. And during the course of taking him down, that individual lost his life. It's never nice when somebody loses their life, but he acted at his own peril. And that wasn't the intention of Penny. Penny was a hero. And what did he get from the city of New York? He got a indictment, a rap sheet, and not a medal. And behind that was Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton to the rescue. Go, Al Sharpton, go. Still running your big blabby mouth for all the wrong reasons. Let's really look at Al Sharpton. Who is Al Sharpton? Well, Al Sharpton is a former coke dealer who is a rat and a snitch for the FBI, and he knows it. He ratted and snitched to get his ass out of trouble. And more important than that, back at the day of Tawana Brawley, he staged a kidnapping and staged a rape and blamed it on the NYPD. And the detective, I believe, investigating that case committed suicide out of that. Al, were you indicted for that suicide? No. For promoting it? No, you weren't. They wouldn't indict their favorite rat and snitch. No, instead, today you still go on with microphones under your face, pressing to prosecute and convict white people. That's right. Back in the day, Al, you called us white crackers. But God forbid the N-word was ever raised. Oh, it would be Al Sharpton to the rescue. Go, Al Sharpton, go. Not that anyone should use either one of those terms. They shouldn't. They're despicable. But you're no real civil rights leader, Al. The real civil rights leaders of my time were the Dr. Martin Luther King, who brought a real, honest voice to the civil rights movement in America and did it with dignity and respect. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, who also added to that voice. And then came Al Sharpton, and the minority community is now challenged on credibility behind your voice. Your voice is not one of truth, logic, or reason. It simply seeks out racial divide. Al, on that subway train, there were black people too, not just white, when Penny stood up. Al, even a black person on that train helped Penny to subdue the culprit. You ignore that. You don't put that out there. I wonder why. You got a real problem with the truth. And now I want to say something to Mayor Eric Adams. Eric, we go back a long way. I worked with you back in the day. You were a transit cop. You know what it is to walk a subway beat and the dangers of the subways in New York, even under your administration. But you changed your position on Penny when you heard the voices of the woke and the far left. No, you don't do that. We're very proud of you. I'm very proud of you as a former police officer on your legacy, on achieving being elected mayor of the city of New York. And your legacy is going to far outlast the generational outcries of the woke and the far left. It's who you are. Be who you are. Don't add your voice to convicting Penny. Let him have a fair trial. I'm sure justice will prevail. And think of your legacy, Mayor. It's going to long outlive the moment of the time with the woke and the left. We're all going to survive them. And who knows what's next. It's something that we all got to really take a serious look at. Our children are being compromised by who? The educational system. These things, we have to stand up and speak against it. We have to have our voices heard. If we still have a voice, I do, and I'm going to add my voice against these things. I really feel compelled, especially at this station in life where I am growing older, to speak out and correct the record. Do what I can do, whatever little bit it may add to, in correcting the record and challenging everything that's going wrong. I want to add my voice to that. I always had a fire in my belly for the underdog and a love for the Constitution of the United States, which I'm still proud to defend. And if I could, I'd join the military and defend it on the battlegrounds. There's nothing like Old Glory, that American flag. Well, this introduction has given you some insight as to who Ron Reale is. The further episodes, I think you're going to like them. I want you to hit the subscribe button. It's free. And the like button if you like this. And until the next episode, I simply say, ciao, be safe, and God bless.